Imagine sitting on a plane, just trying to mind your own business, when a passenger starts harassing you, saying things that cut deep, making you feel unsafe. That's exactly what happened to a young black woman on this flight. Every move, every smirk, every subtle intimidation made the hours unbearable. But here's the twist. She wasn't alone. A woman sitting a few rows back, completely unassuming in casual clothes, noticed everything. She didn't rush in. She didn't panic. She just watched, cataloging every single move. And when the moment was right, she stepped in and changed everything. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unbelievable stories like this. The airplane sat on the tarmac, engines humming faintly as the final boarding calls echoed through the terminal. Nia adjusted the strap of her bag, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear of flying, but from an odd sense of anticipation she couldn't shake. She had flown before, but today felt different. Maybe it was the unusual quiet of the airport, the kind that pressed against the skin like invisible hands, or the way the sunlight caught on the glass of the terminal, fracturing the shadows in strange ways. Her flight had been delayed once already, and she had watched time slip away, hour by hour, losing herself in the small details of travel. The sharp scent of coffee mingling with the faint aroma of cleaning chemicals. The way the boarding agents' crisp uniforms contrasted with the weary passengers shuffling through the gates. She liked to notice things, little quirks in people's behavior that most ignored. It made her feel grounded. Once aboard, Nia made her way down the aisle, her eyes scanning for her seat. She was lucky. The middle seat of a relatively empty row gave her some space. She settled in, placing her bag under the seat in front of her, and pulled out a book she had been meaning to read for weeks. The leather cover felt smooth under her fingers, the pages crisp. She opened it, letting herself sink into the story, the hum of the plane beginning to soothe her nerves. That's when she first noticed him. Brad had boarded the plane last, slipping into the aisle with the kind of ease that came from wealth and entitlement. His sharp blazer was tailored, his hair perfectly styled, and there was a faint scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him. He had that look, the one that suggested he expected the world to revolve around him. At first, it was subtle. He leaned too far into the aisle to glance at someone else's screen, laughed a little too loud, and tapped his phone in a rhythm that seemed calculated to irritate. Nia tried to ignore him, focusing on her book, but she couldn't help noticing the glances he threw her way. They were small at first, almost casual, but there was a sharpness in them, a tiny edge that pricked at her skin. Brad's attention shifted fully toward her as the flight attendant completed the safety demonstration. He smirked, leaning back in his seat, letting the armrest between them serve as a silent barrier he could casually encroach upon. "You flying alone?" he asked, voice carrying just enough for her to hear without being overtly loud. Double quotes, "Yes," Nia said softly, not looking up. He chuckled, a sound that grated against her nerves. "Interesting. I didn't think anyone like you would be on this flight." The words weren't loud, but the implication was crystal clear. Nia's hands tightened around her book. She considered asking him to stop, but feared that it would escalate the situation unnecessarily. Meanwhile, Lauren had already taken notice. She was seated a few rows back, leaning slightly to glance at the scene unfolding. Onlookers saw just another young woman in casual clothes, a sleeveless top and shorts, sneakers tapping lightly against the floor as she adjusted her position. But Lauren had spent years reading people, detecting the subtle cues of aggression, entitlement, and deceit. And Brad radiated it. She observed quietly, taking note of how he shifted in his seat whenever Nia moved, the smirk that never left his face, and the barely perceptible flexing of his fingers against the armrest. There was a rhythm to his harassment, an almost performative quality, as if he were testing the boundaries of how far he could push someone without consequence. Nia tried to immerse herself in her book, but her mind kept drifting. She remembered walking through the airport earlier, seeing a mother soothe her crying toddler, noticing a businessman checking his emails repeatedly, the way the sunlight glinted off the luggage carousels. These small human moments now felt worlds away from the tension building in her row. Brad escalated gradually. First, it was subtle comments about her hair, about how she organized her bag. Then, he started making gestures, leaning just enough into her space to make her flinch, tapping the armrest so she could feel it through her body. Each act was calculated to provoke, to unsettle, to dominate. Nia's heart raced. Her pulse thumped like a drum in her ears. She looked around, hoping a flight attendant might notice. But the cabin was a bubble of quiet, the other passengers absorbed in headphones, magazines, and screens. There was no one to intervene. Lauren's eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't move immediately, waiting to see how the situation would evolve. Her experience telling her that timing was everything. She noted the rise in Brad's volume, the subtle way he tried to assert control, and the flicker of fear or, at least hesitation on Nia's face. As the flight continued, Nia became hyper-aware of every motion, every glance, every breath of the people near her. She noticed a young woman across the aisle, tapping her pen nervously against a notebook. An elderly man, several rows up, adjusting his hearing aid repeatedly. The soft whir of the air conditioning overhead. Every detail seemed magnified, filtered through the lens of her discomfort. Brad's behavior escalated further. Though still calculated, he began tapping his foot against her seat slightly, a grin spreading across his face as he noted her reaction. Nia clenched her fists under the table, refusing to let him see her anger. She felt trapped, like the airplane itself had become a cage. Lauren adjusted her position slightly, leaning forward to observe more closely. She noted the precision of Brad's movements, the way he shifted weight, how he made calculated eye contact, how he seemed to anticipate reactions. Lauren's mind cataloged everything, preparing, planning, though she did not yet move. She understood that confronting someone prematurely could backfire, especially when the target was oblivious to the authority Lauren wielded. Hours passed, marked only by the dimming and brightening of the cabin lights and the occasional announcements over the intercom. MIA felt every second, each one stretching like a taut wire, ready to snap. She tried to focus on the story in her book, but her concentration was shattered again and again by Brad's quiet mockery and invasive presence. Lauren's patience was quiet but palpable. She knew the moment for intervention would come, but for now she observed, cataloged, and calculated. Her presence was a silent shield, though Nia didn't yet know it. Every subtle motion of Brad's hand, every snicker he attempted to suppress, was noted. Lauren recognized the patterns of escalation. She had seen them countless times, in courtrooms, in police reports, in stories that didn't always end well. The sun began to dip below the horizon as the plane reached cruising altitude, painting the clouds with streaks of gold and rose. Nia glanced out the window briefly. The vast expanse of sky, a strange contrast to the small, tense battlefield of her row. She breathed deeply, trying to find calm amid the storm of anxiety and indignation that Brad's presence stirred in her dot. Brad shifted again, leaning closer, testing her patience, muttering something just low enough that only she could hear. Nia's fingers tightened around the edge of the book, knuckles whitening. She felt exposed, scrutinized, humiliated. She wanted to look away, to escape, but she couldn't. Something inside her refused to give him the satisfaction. Lauren, sitting silently, recognized that looked the mixture of defiance and fear. She knew that while the flight was still long, the balance of power was shifting. Even if subtly, she remained calm, her posture relaxed, but alert, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike, not with violence, but with authority and justice. And so, the flight continued. The cabin, a bubble of ordinary motion overlaying a tension that only a few could perceive. Nia sat aware of every breath, every glance, every movement of the man determined to harass her. Lauren watched, silent and precise, cataloging each infraction, each escalation, preparing for the moment when she would step in. The sun's last rays disappeared, and the cabin lights dimmed into the soft glow of evening. Nia exhaled slowly, trying to steady her nerves. Somewhere behind her, Lauren adjusted her seat, eyes still fixed on Brad, her mind moving a few steps ahead, planning, waiting. The tension in the air was palpable. The stage was set, the players were in place, and though the storm had not yet broken, it loomed, inevitable and immense. End of Part 1. Recap. The hum of the airplane had shifted into a rhythm, a low vibration that seemed to synchronize with Nia's heartbeat. The initial anxiety that had gripped her began to settle into a quiet vigilance. She was hyper-aware of everything: the subtle sway of the plane, the rustle of the air vents, the faint scent of recycled air, the occasional cough of passengers nearby. Each sound and movement seemed amplified, as if the cabin had transformed into its own universe, one where the minutiae mattered more than anywhere else. Brad had not ceased his small, insidious harassment. In fact, over the last hour, it had grown in subtlety and menace. He didn't shout or overtly threaten, at least. Not yet, but his calculated gestures, the smirks, the slight nudges of the armrest, the way he lingered just a little too close when Nia adjusted her bag, all created a pressure that she could feel in her chest. It was the kind of harassment designed to wear someone down, to make them question their own boundaries and reactions. Nia tried to focus on her book again, letting the words blur and merge into a calming background noise. But she couldn't concentrate. She kept looking up, forcing herself to assess him, measuring how far he was leaning, how his eyes darted when other passengers passed by. She had learned, over time, to anticipate people like him, but being trapped in a small seat with nowhere to escape made that skill feel inadequate. Across the aisle, Lauren observed silently. She wasn't just watching Brad, she was watching the cabin itself. Flight attendants, moving up and down the aisles, passengers, dozing or scrolling on their devices. The elderly man, several rows forward, adjusting his blanket. It all painted a picture of a microcosm of society under stress. Lauren could read tension like a map, noting where pressure points existed, where someone might crack, where intervention would have the greatest impact. She noticed a young couple several rows ahead. They were whispering, occasionally glancing back toward Nia's row. It wasn't curiosity alone. There was discomfort there, a recognition of something inappropriate happening. Lauren made a mental note of them. Their observation could become relevant if Brad's behavior escalated further. Nia shifted in her seat again, trying to reclaim some physical space, but the aisle and armrests limited her movements. Every time she adjusted her bag or leaned forward to readjust her book, she felt the brush of Brad's foot, the faint nudge of his elbow. It was a dance of intimidation, subtle and deliberate. She remembered walking through the airport earlier that day, noting small things that had now taken on an odd resonance. The way the security guard had lingered just a second too long at the X-ray machine, the way the terminal's fluorescent lights cast long shadows, the soft murmur of travelers speaking in multiple languages. Of it seemed to foreshadow this moment. She realized now that she had been subconsciously preparing herself for confrontation. Even if she didn't know it, Brad's behavior escalated in ways more psychological than physical. He began whispering, just loud enough for her to hear, making subtle remarks about the way she dressed, the tone of her voice, the way she held herself. Each comment was like a drop of water on stone, eroding her sense of comfort, inch by inch. She fought the rising anger and fear, keeping her composure, but it was exhausting. Lauren leaned slightly forward, resting her elbows on her knees as her gaze never left Brad. She noted the exact way he moved his fingers when he gestured, the twitch of his jaw when he forced a laugh, the way he looked around to see if anyone was paying attention. She cataloged every micro-expression, every subtle sign of guilt or anticipation of dominance. Her experience told her that people like Brad were predictable, and that predictability would be his undoing. The cabin lights dimmed again as the plane entered a different altitude layer, the artificial dusk creating long shadowed lines across the seats. Nia glanced around, noticing more passengers starting to stir, shifting in their seats, adjusting blankets, pulling out devices to distract themselves. Some gave fleeting, sympathetic looks toward her. Others seemed oblivious, absorbed in their own worlds. Brad's eyes caught hers briefly, and Nia felt the old tightening in her chest. The primal alertness of being hunted. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You think you're safe here?" Nia swallowed, unsure whether to respond, whether acknowledging him would give him power, whether ignoring him would provoke him further. Lauren, however, had already calculated the situation. She wasn't going to rush in. She didn't need to. Observing, cataloging, waiting, these were tools of justice that Brad could not see coming. He had no idea that a judge, trained to read people and anticipate escalation, was sitting within reach, disguised in plain clothing. Watching his every move, time seemed to stretch. Each minute felt elongated, marked by Brad's intermittent smirks, Nia's shallow breathing, the occasional soft click of seatbelts, as other passengers adjusted. Nia felt every inch of space between them shrank, every subtle action charged with significance. It was like a slow, invisible chess match. Each participant, unaware of the full board, yet moving pieces with instinct. Brad tried a new tactic, mocking gestures, tapping the tray table in front of Nia, making exaggerated movements as if to suggest clumsiness or incompetence on her part. Passengers nearby glanced over, some frowning slightly, others averting eyes awkwardly. Nia's stomach knotted tighter, but she refused to rise, refusing to give him the satisfaction of visible fear. Lauren noticed the tiny escalation, the way Brad's smugness was increasing alongside a slight tension in his shoulders. It was a classic pattern. People like him needed to feel control, to assert dominance subtly before moving to more overt actions. Lauren remained calm, but inside, her mind mapped contingencies. If the crew didn't intervene, if he escalated physically, if he tried to use charm to neutralize authority, she had planned for all of it. To pass the time, Nia tried to distract herself with memories of her life outside the airplane. She thought of her apartment, the small potted plants on her windowsill, the smell of coffee in the morning, the laughter of friends during late-night conversations. These fragments of normal life acted like anchors in a stormy sea, keeping her grounded as she navigated the tension of the cabin. Brad noticed her attempts at composure and seemed to enjoy them. He leaned back, smirking, whispering again, "You think you can just sit there quietly? That's cute." Nia felt the flush of anger rising, but she forced herself to inhale slowly, counting silently to 10, finding the smallest ways to maintain dignity. Lauren observed every detail, the cadence of his voice, the micro-expressions of arrogance, the subtle adjustments in posture. She saw the cracks in his confidence, the signs that he was beginning to feel the pressure of scrutiny without realizing the source. The other passengers remained mostly unaware, some giving fleeting looks, others immersed in their own distractions. Hours passed in this quiet battle. Meals were served, drinks were offered. The plane's steady hum created a strange, hypnotic atmosphere. Nia's senses were heightened. The soft clinking of cutlery, the faint rustle of napkins, the whisper of Brad's foot tapping against her seat. Each sound was a reminder that she was still under siege, still being tested. Lauren, ever patient, remained silent. Her mind cataloged every movement, every action, every glance. She was waiting for the right moment, though she didn't need to intervene immediately. The key was to let the situation reveal itself, to observe patterns, and to ensure that when the time came, justice would strike precisely, undeniably. Nia tried to reconnect with the mundane details around her. She noticed a man across the aisle playing a game on his tablet, a child dozing against a parent, the quiet conversation of two women several rows back. Life went on in small, ordinary bursts, even as Brad's harassment loomed like a shadow over her dot. Brad, frustrated by the lack of visible reaction, shifted again. He attempted to corner her subtly, nudging his seat forward slightly as she adjusted hers. His arrogance was palpable, a toxic aura that sought to dominate. But Nia remained composed, breathing slowly, counting internally, refusing to let him gain the satisfaction of eliciting fear. Lauren's presence was subtle but palpable, though Nia didn't know it yet. The tension in the cabin was beginning to shift. Brad was no longer completely in control. He felt the pressure of unseen authority, the weight of scrutiny from someone who could see through every pretense, every mask, even as night fell outside the windows, painting the clouds in deep indigo and streaks of distant light. The slow, tense rhythm inside the cabin continued. Nia's thoughts drifted again to life outside this small metal tube in the sky, her family. Her dreams, the world she inhabited beyond the confines of harassment and fear. She felt a quiet determination growing, a resolve not to be broken by someone's cruelty. The flight continued, each hour stretching longer, each movement charged with subtle significance. Nia felt exhausted, drained by the constant tension, but also quietly aware that she was not alone. Somewhere behind her, Lauren remained vigilant, her watchful eyes cataloging every act of harassment, every crack in Brad's facade. The cabin had settled into an uneasy rhythm, the kind that felt almost alive. The faint hum of the engines, the soft murmur of passengers, and the occasional clatter of service carts created a constant undercurrent, a steady heartbeat that framed the tension in Nia's row. Every slight movement, every whisper of cloth or foot against the floor felt magnified, like the air itself was aware of the silent war playing out. Nia shifted again, trying to find a more comfortable position, but the narrow seat offered little reprieve. Brad's presence loomed just beside her, invisible yet overwhelming. He leaned slightly toward her as she bent to pick up her bag, a faint smirk playing across his lips. "Careful," he whispered, the words venomous in their casual tone. "Wouldn't want to drop something." She froze for a fraction of a second before straightening. The warning in his tone was clear. He wanted her flustered, wanted her to feel exposed. But Nia's training in self-control, the countless times she had faced microaggressions and subtle bullying, kicked in. She inhaled deeply, letting the rhythm of the plane guide her breathing. Calm, measured, controlled. She ignored him, returning her attention to the book in her lap. Though the words blurred across the page, Brad, frustrated by her composure, escalated again. This time, it wasn't verbal. He nudged the armrest deliberately, just enough to make her flinch. He tapped his foot repeatedly, an almost imperceptible pattern designed to irritate. A faint laugh escaped him as he noticed her tensing. To any other observer, it might seem like nothing, but Nia could feel the calculated malice behind each movement. Lauren, seated a few rows back, watched everything unfold with unwavering focus. She wasn't just observing Brad, she was studying him, analyzing every muscle twitch, every shift in posture, every micro-expression that hinted at arrogance, aggression, or insecurity. She cataloged the trajectory of his behavior, mentally mapping the escalation patterns that, if left unchecked, could lead to physical harassment or worse. Lauren's background as a judge had trained her to notice these things. Years of courtroom observation had honed her ability to read people, to predict how they would act under pressure. Brad's subtle movements and calculated arrogance were textbook examples of someone who overestimates their control, someone who believes authority doesn't exist in unexpected places. Lauren made a silent note of that, her mind already anticipating the steps she would need to take to neutralize him, without causing panic in the cabin. Meanwhile, Nia tried to immerse herself in normalcy. She watched the other passengers, the elderly man several rows up, quietly knitting, the young couple murmuring to each other, a child dozing against a parent's shoulder. These ordinary moments contrasted sharply with the tension in her own space. She focused on the small things, the way the sun slanted through the window, painting the seats in warm gold, the faint hum of the air vent, the comforting heft of her book in her hands. But Brad wasn't finished. He shifted again, leaning slightly closer, his smirk widening. "You're awfully quiet, for someone who seems so sensitive," he murmured, the words dripping with mockery. He wasn't shouting, but his tone carried the same weight as a slap and assertion of dominance. meant to unsettle and intimidate. Nia felt a surge of anger, but she held it at bay. She reminded herself that responding impulsively could escalate the situation, and she needed to survive this moment intact. Her eyes flicked toward the aisle, hoping for some sign of help. But the crew was preoccupied with serving drinks and snacks. Lauren noted the subtle shift in Brad's behavior. He was becoming more aggressive, testing the limits of personal space, looking for reactions. His arrogance was starting to falter under observation, though he didn't yet realize it. The best part of her plan, she knew, was to remain unobtrusive, for now to let him reveal himself fully before taking decisive action. Time seemed to stretch unnaturally. Nia could feel the minutes stretching into hours, each one heavy with tension. She noticed more passengers glancing over now, some whispering softly, their eyes darting between her and Brad. No one intervened, but the atmosphere in the cabin was charged, a collective awareness that something was amiss. Brad, growing impatient, attempted a different tactic. He leaned back in his seat, giving a soft, exaggerated sigh, then muttered under his breath, loud enough for her to hear, "Must be tough being so delicate." Nia felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her composure, returning her gaze to the book. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't give him the satisfaction of noticing. Lauren's eyes narrowed. She had seen this pattern countless times. Subtle harassment escalating to psychological warfare, designed to break down the target. She adjusted her posture slightly, her presence silent but imposing. No one else in the cabin noticed, but Lauren's calm vigilance began to subtly shift the energy around Brad. He felt, without knowing why, that he was being watched with an intensity he couldn't control. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow as the flight continued into the evening. Nia noticed the reflection of the orange sunset in the window pane, a fleeting reminder of the world outside, serene and vast. Inside the plane, however, tension remained taut. Every movement, every whispered remark, every tap of Brad's foot was magnified in her awareness. She thought of her life outside the airplane, the small apartment with the potted plants on the windowsill, the laughter of friends during late-night talks, the warmth of family dinners. These memories grounded her, provided her with an anchor as the storm of harassment swirled around her. Brad tried again, this time more boldly. He nudged her chair with his knee, under the guise of stretching, smirking as if testing the limits of decency. Nia stiffened, feeling the violation, but kept her voice calm. "Please, stop," she said quietly, almost imploringly. Though her tone carried the weight of exhaustion, Brad chuckled softly, dismissive. "Relax, it's just a joke," he said. His tone suggested he believed the world owed him compliance. But Nia didn't laugh. She didn't flinch further. She simply returned her attention to the book, even though the words meant little in the face of persistent harassment. Lauren, watching every subtle interaction, noted the shift in Brad's demeanor. He was becoming increasingly frustrated by her lack of response. The power dynamic was slowly tilting, though Nia didn't yet realize it. Lauren remained patient, letting Brad's arrogance build, observing how he reacted when his subtle, psychological tactics failed to elicit the expected submission. Other passengers began to notice more clearly. The young couple across the aisle whispered to each other, casting glances toward Nia's row. The elderly man with the knitting furrowed his brow, adjusting his blanket. A faint tension rippled through the cabin, the collective subconscious of observers sensing the imbalance. Nia, meanwhile, focused inward. She reminded herself that she was strong, that she had faced adversity before. She remembered her mother's words, "Hold your ground, even when no one else will." The mantra ran through her mind like a lifeline, steadying her breath and her racing heartbeat. Brad's arrogance began to crack subtly. He leaned forward again, lowering his voice, testing the boundaries once more. "You think ignoring me will help," he murmured, though his confidence now carried a slight tremor. Lauren's eyes caught that tremor immediately. She knew instinctively that he was starting to feel pressure, that his carefully constructed mask of control was beginning to slip. She remained still, a quiet presence, invisible in casual attire, waiting for the exact moment when intervention would be most effective. Hours passed in this delicate dance. Nia's nerves were frayed, every moment a test of endurance. She felt the weight of Brad's smirks, the subtle provocations, the invasive gestures. But she also felt a growing sense of inner resolve. She was not alone. Lauren's silent vigilance created an invisible shield, though Nia didn't yet know it. The sky outside darkened completely, deep navy stretching endlessly, dotted with distant stars. The gentle hum of the engines, the faint glow of cabin lights, the soft rustle of passengers settling. For the night all created a surreal cocoon around the tension-filled row. Brad's frustration mounted. He tapped the tray table again, a faintly louder nudge that drew a few curious glances from nearby passengers. Nia felt her jaw tighten, but held her composure, forcing herself to breathe evenly, to remain calm under pressure. Lauren, ever precise, cataloged each detail: the tapping of the tray, the slight sway in Brad's posture, the subtle changes in his gaze. All were signs that he was edging closer to breaking decorum, that the moment of critical intervention was approaching. Even as Nia tried to focus on ordinary thoughts, her favorite coffee shop, the scent of fresh rain, the laughter of her friends, Brad's presence was a constant, invisible weight. The small space between seats became a battleground, every glance and gesture carrying significance beyond its size. The flight stretched on, hours bleeding into each other, each minute marked by subtle escalation. Nia's strength became mental as well as emotional. She noticed a few passengers, quietly watching, sensing the tension but unsure how to respond. The cabin was alive with silent awareness, everyone touched by the undercurrent of harassment, though most didn't understand its depth. Lauren remained calm, calculating, anticipating. She had seen countless situations like this, in courtrooms, in police reports, in subtle human interactions where power dynamics spiraled dangerously. She waited, knowing the exact moment would come when she could act decisively, ensuring that Brad's arrogance would meet consequences that extended far beyond the confines of the airplane cabin. And so, the night deepened. Outside the windows and inside, tension thickened. Nia sat, breathing slowly, aware of the psychological warfare waging beside her. Brad's arrogance cracked slowly, his confidence faltering under invisible scrutiny. Lauren's presence remained a quiet, unseen force, a slow burn guarantee that justice, when it arrived, would arrive completely, without warning, and irrevocably. The cabin was quiet now, in a way that felt charged, as if the plane itself were holding its breath. Most passengers had settled in for the long flight, earbuds in, blankets tucked, the occasional whisper or shuffle punctuating the steady hum of the engines. But in Nia's row, the air was thick, heavy with tension. Every movement Brad made seemed magnified, every small smirk a deliberate taunt, every whisper aimed to undermine her composure. Nia kept her posture straight, hands resting lightly on her book. She had long since stopped reading the words. They were now a shield, a focus for her mind. Every instinct, every memory, every lesson in patience she had learned over the years surged to the surface. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat, each pulse a reminder that she needed to stay composed. But it wasn't fear. This time it was determination. Brad, sensing her resolve, grew restless, filtered occasionally, replaced by subtle tension in his jaw, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He leaned forward once more, tapping the armrest, muttering under his breath, trying to draw her into a reaction. "You think you can just sit there, quietly," he whispered, barely audible to anyone else. But Nia didn't flinch. She didn't respond. She let the words slide like water over stone, her mind fixed on breathing, counting silently and maintaining control. She knew that giving him satisfaction would only embolden him further. That was when Lauren finally decided the time was right. She had watched Brad long enough to predict his patterns, to see the cracks forming in his arrogance. She moved with the quiet precision of someone trained to observe and act, at the exact right moment. Her footsteps were soft against the aisle carpet, measured, deliberate, unnoticed by anyone except the keen eyes of those paying attention. Brad, oblivious to Lauren's approach, shifted in his seat, muttering another low remark meant for Naya alone. He was so consumed with his own perceived dominance that he didn't see the woman in casual clothing moving toward him with calm, deliberate authority, sir, Lauren said firmly, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. Her voice was soft, but it carried an unmistakable authority, the kind that made someone stop mid. Brad froze, startled by the calm strength in her tone. Who are you? He asked, trying to regain control, his smirk faltering. I'm someone who doesn't appreciate harassment, Lauren replied evenly. Her eyes locked on his with an intensity that made him flinch. He could sense the weight behind her gaze, a quiet, uncompromising force that demanded accountability. Other passengers began to notice the shift. Brad's body language changed, subtle tension spreading across his shoulders. He looked around, realizing that several people were now watching, whispering to each other. The mask of confidence he had worn so easily was cracking. You can't do this, Brad stammered, a nervous edge creeping into his voice. He glanced at the flight attendants, hoping for intervention on his side, but none came. Lauren's presence dominated the aisle, quiet but undeniable. You can and you will, Lauren said, her tone unwavering. This behavior is unacceptable. You've crossed a line, and there will be consequences. Brad's eyes darted around, the first signs of genuine fear appearing. He tried to compose himself, but it was too late. Lauren's subtle authority, combined with her meticulous observation of his behavior, left him exposed. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that he had underestimated the people around him. Lauren gestured toward the flight attendants. Secure this passenger. He will not be allowed to continue behaving in this manner. Her words carried a calm finality. Brad's protests fell flat. The crew followed her instructions with quiet precision. Passengers nearby whispered, some nodding, some looking astonished. But the tension in the cabin had shifted irrevocably. Naya sat back in her seat, relief washing over her like a tide. The constant pressure, the intrusive harassment, the small but relentless violations of her space, all of it was being addressed. She realized the weight she had carried was finally being lifted, and she could breathe again. Brad, now subdued and quiet, was escorted by the crew to a secure area, his arrogance replaced by shock and disbelief. He muttered incoherently, trying to justify his actions, but no one listened. Lauren's presence alone had dismantled the persona he had wielded like a weapon throughout the flight. Once he was contained, Lauren returned to her seat, casual and unassuming, as though nothing had happened. She adjusted her position, her eyes scanning the cabin briefly, noting the subtle nods of gratitude and relief from passengers who had sensed the tension but had been powerless to act. Nia turned slightly, catching Lauren's gaze. There was a brief acknowledgement, a silent understanding between them. Nia didn't yet know the full extent of who Lauren was, only that the woman had been an unseen guardian, precise and formidable. A quiet wave of gratitude swept through her, mingled with awe at the calm authority Lauren had wielded. So, effortlessly, the remainder of the flight passed with a gentle unease. Passengers whispered quietly among themselves, some discussing the incident, others returning to their own distractions. The hum of the engines became almost comforting, a reminder that the ordeal was nearing its conclusion. Nia focused on the ordinary world outside the windows, the sky dark and speckled with distant stars, letting the calm of the night wash over her. Landing approached, and the cabin crew prepared for arrival. Brad, escorted and subdued, was waiting for authorities on the ground. Nia exhaled slowly, finally allowing herself to relax. The tension that had gripped her for hours had dissolved, replaced by a sense of vindication and safety. Lauren remained alert until the very end, her presence a silent reassurance. She had watched, assessed, and intervened at exactly the right moments, ensuring that justice was served without creating chaos or panic. Her casual appearance had concealed the authority she wielded effortlessly, leaving Brad's arrogance fully exposed. As passengers disembarked, murmurs of astonishment and relief passed through the aisles. Some spoke of the subtle but effective intervention. Others simply marveled at how quickly the situation had been resolved without dramatic confrontation. Nia moved carefully through the cabin, her mind still processing the events, feeling the lingering adrenaline slowly subside. On the tarmac, authorities met Brad, taking him into custody. Lauren observed quietly, ensuring that the consequences of his actions would be formalized. Nia watched from a distance, feeling a strange mix of relief, gratitude, and awe at the precise way justice had been enacted. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to smile. The weight she had carried, the fear, the humiliation, it had all been addressed, not through luck or coincidence, but through the careful observation, patience, and decisive action of someone who had seen the truth and acted with authority. The airport lights glimmered in the distance, the hum of activity, a comforting backdrop. Nia felt a sense of closure, though she knew the memory of the harassment would linger. Still, it had been countered by an unanticipated force of justice, leaving her with a renewed sense of strength. Lauren walked past, casual and unassuming, the very image of a young woman in shorts and a sleeveless top, sneakers tapping softly against the terminal floor. Yet beneath that ordinary exterior was the quiet power of a judge, the capacity to see truth, to act decisively, and to ensure accountability in the most unexpected circumstances. Nia stepped forward, breathing in the crisp night air. She had survived, and justice had been done. But she also carried with her the awareness that the world could be cruel, that arrogance and entitlement could manifest anywhere, even thousands of feet above the ground. What mattered most, she realized, was the vigilance, courage, and quiet authority that could intervene when needed. The flight had ended, but the story of the day, the subtle dynamics of observation, tension, and justice would remain with her forever.